All right. Thanks for joining, everyone. I know it's 9 o'clock, and I really appreciate everybody taking the time to be with us this morning. If you're able to, if you could put your name and your organization and where you're from in the chat so that we can kind of get a sense, that would be super appreciated. My name is Julia Crowley, and I'm the director of Pro Wash and Scale. And I know that people are still coming in, so really appreciate the time. I know everybody has a lot of things going on, so thanks. You could enter in the chat your name and your organization, that would be great. As background, kind of as people are coming, wanted to give a little bit of overview about Pro Wash and Scale. Pro Wash and Scale kind of was awarded by USAID as part of the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance, and we're currently managed by the US Department of State. Our goal here is really to enhance the impact, sustainability, and scalability of food and nutrition activities in both emergency and resilience settings. And we do that in specific technical areas, including WASH here, water, natural resources, agriculture, livelihoods, and markets. So that's kind of a little bit about us. And I really do appreciate everybody taking your time today to join us. And we provide kind of support in our technical areas through capacity strengthening, knowledge sharing, like this webinar, and learning. Just before we get a little bit started, we will be providing interpretation, French interpretation in this meeting. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, there should be a little globe, and then if you click on the globe, you should be able to see English and French. So if you're able to choose the language that you would prefer as part of the interpretation, that would be great. If you have any questions on how to do this or you're having issues, please just let us know. The video and PowerPoint are being recorded, and we will be sharing it outside of this, after this webinar. So with that, I think there's a first couple poll questions that we would like your input just to kind of get a sense. The first one is about your organization, and the second, if it's a local or international organization. So with that, if you should see it on the poll on your screen, if you have time, please just enter in what most corresponds to your organization. So I'll give a couple minutes for that. If you have any questions, please put in the chat. So with that, just kind of as background, thanks for this. And then continue to put your name in the chat box. We really appreciate it. And just kind of a refresh, we will be sending the recording and the PowerPoint to those who registered after this meeting. Everything is also available on our website at fsnnetwork.org. So that's where you will be able to find everything mentioned in this webinar. So in the meantime, yep, perfect. I will pass it over to Steve.
Hey, thanks, Julia. Hi, everyone. I'm Steve Serra. I'm a lead wash advisor on the Pro Wash and Scale team. And I want to thank you all for joining us for the launch of this CLTS idea book. We understand everyone has busy schedules and conflicting priorities, so thank you for taking the time to join us today. The goal of this webinar is to introduce the idea book and review its content so that everyone is able to use it in their programs. We will also reserve enough time for question and answer and discussion, so feel free to place any questions in the chat along the way, and we'll circle back to them at the end. Julia and I are thrilled to be joined by Jess MacArthur today, who was formerly the Research and Learning Advisor with ProWash and Scale and is currently a knowledge broker with EVOG. Jess was one of the incredible authors of this idea book, and we're thankful to have her today to review its components. Before I hand it over to Jess, I just wanted to know that Jess is going to cover this in more detail, but at a very high level, the idea book lists 27 ideas to address common problems in CLTS programs with links to resources and a process to go from identifying the problems to implementing new ideas and monitoring the effectiveness of those new ideas. And while the resource is currently available in English, there is a French version on its way. So we'll notify you when that is available. And also keep in mind that this version of the idea book is a pilot version, as noted on the cover page. So it's meant to be updated and adapted to other contexts. Without further ado, let me pass it over to Jess, who will review the idea book in detail. Over to you, Jess.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Steve and Julia and the team. It's really a privilege to be with you all today. As Steve said, my name is Jess MacArthur, and I am a very proud former member of the PWS team and currently working with EVOG, 60% and consulting 40% on the side. So it's lovely to see many familiar faces and many familiar names. We can go to the next slide. So what is an idea book? We'll be talking about that in more detail, but really the concept and the idea behind this idea book came from a conversation that Nicole Klesner-Medzner and I had several years ago, thinking about how do we help our program teams get out of the rut that can happen sometimes in CLTS programming. So many programs and many teams were getting stuck and not knowing how to overcome those challenges. And these conversations then led to us working with Sue and the UNICEF West Africa Hub more broadly, as well as the Sanitation Learning Hub, to write this document. And you see many names. There are probably many more we could add to this, of folks who have contributed to materials that have gone into this as well. But this is an open opportunity as we continue to expand and to grow this document too. We love your ideas and your thoughts, and we'll give you an opportunity at the end of today to provide, or a method to provide feedback as you've tested and as you've used this tool. Again, originally the funding for this was from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and also from USAID. We can go next, thanks. So we have bucketed kind of some problems with CLTS programming into 3 buckets. And we know that whenever you put things in buckets, it's always going to be flawed, but we had to start with somewhere. So we have 3 buckets. We have one bucket that is focused on enabling environment problems. We have one bucket that's focused on service delivery problems, and a third bucket focused on demand mobilization problems. And to identify these 3 different buckets of problems, we used a lot of literature and practice resources, maybe some frameworks that you might be familiar with. If you have a thought of what frameworks we might have used, pop those in the chat. But we were relying on existing thinking and existing resources to identify these initial problems. So I'm going to speak to them very quickly. The first one is unclear policy and unaligned strategies. So in many contexts, especially contexts that have humanitarian challenges, we find that policies are confusing and potentially unaligned. Another challenge is insufficient financing. This is a really common problem. We all know this one. The third is unclear institutional arrangements. Who does what when? It's tricky sometimes, isn't it? The fourth one there is poor planning, monitoring, and reviewing, and weak capacity development. And those are the 5 that we see in the enabling environment bucket. Our next bucket is the service delivery bucket. And this comes from market systems thinking, and maybe if you're familiar with the market systems development work and market-based sanitation work, some familiar words here. So insufficient service delivery research and product system design. Does the products that we're supporting, do they actually work? Second one is ineffective delivery approaches and business models. And the third is poor market interactions. Do the supply chains of materials move from the capital city to rural areas, for example? And the final bucket there is demand mobilization. So weak social permission, limited ability, and limited motivation. This is coming from foam. So you can kind of see we tried. I mean, we could have spent 6 years just thinking about which buckets to put problems in, and we probably are missing some. So we'd love to hear if you think we're missing big things. We'll come back to them again at the end. But these are the buckets that we have identified as the key problems with CLTS programming. Next slide. But then how do we move from these problems to solutions? And so that's where we came to this idea of an idea book. So many great teams have been working on these problems for many years, but often those ideas are not linked to the problems. And so we have created this very simple tool, hopefully simple, to help link the problems to solutions that other teams have tried. And that's really that's the whole point of this book, is the main part of this idea book is a list of problems and a list of potential ideas of how to solve those problems. So I think we can just stop the webinar there. You guys can go home. I can drink my tea. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to now walk through the meat of how we connect those lines from problems to ideas. Next slide. All right, this is a long list. You might recognize this list because I just read through it a moment ago. But there's going to be a poll that will pop up on your screen. Apologies that it's only currently in English, but I'd love to hear from you. What challenges are you experiencing in your CLTS programming? And if you're not currently doing CLTS, what problems have you seen in CLTS programming? And try to, in the poll, we'll stick to these buckets, but recognizing that there are other ways of framing or describing or defining these definitions or these buckets. So we'll just give everyone just a quick moment. And I'm really loving the chat participation, but I need to find a way to turn the chat off so that I don't get distracted every time that a beautiful reminder pops up. I don't know how to do that. All right, we'll give everyone just one more minute to click on what are those challenges that you have seen, that you have experienced or are currently experiencing. And you can click multiple options. All right. Do we have a good number of people, Katie, who have responded? Can we pop the results up? Okay. So interesting. If you take a look on your screen, you'll see limited motivation coming up. 46% of folks have not identified it. Weak capacity development, 39%. Oh, insufficient financing, 51%. Yeah, these are really key problems, key challenges and key problems. And so it looks like we maybe are on the right path, but more to come. Next slide. All right, so this is an example page from the idea book. And here again, we tried to be as simple as possible. So this is not ever going to be exhaustive. So we're trying to find that sweet spot between enough detail to be useful, but not too much detail to be frustrating. And so here is an example of the problem unclear policy and unaligned strategies. And you notice here that we have a detailed definition of the problem. What do we mean by that? What do we mean by those words? We have a box that is technical resources. I think I can draw on the screen myself. So technical resources here. And those include some key tools or things to read. So if you're really concerned about policy and unaligned strategies, this is a really great place to start on these technical resources. We've also noticed whether those resources are in English or French. And I think in some places we've also noticed that they're in other languages. Then we move to the ideas part of the page. And here you have, we've identified four main ideas or four main strategies to help unblock this challenge of policy and unaligned strategies. And then finally, we've given for each one of those ideas at least one example, potentially two or three examples, so that you can see what's happened in other places. And this guidebook was originally developed for West Africa, and so many of the examples are focused on the West African context, but that doesn't mean that there aren't good resources for other places. If you see a place where the context is not West Africa, that means we couldn't find a good resource for that particular context. We also prioritize materials that were in multiple languages, like French and English both. All right, next slide. How do I get rid of my there we go. Perfect. Okay, so we see here's another example. We have another problem. This is the ineffective delivery approach in business model design. You'll see again the definition, the technical resources, the ideas. Here we have three, and the examples. And to the next slide. And one more from that third bucket of demand mobilization. Again, here, this is weak social permission. So this could be related to social norms or collective action or social connections. And once again, we have here four ideas, those technical resources, important foundations, and the different examples as well. Wonderful. So that's basically the main bulk of the tool, but we recognize that connecting, if you remember from the very beginning of my presentation, connecting those problems to ideas, that connective tissue is actually where teams get stuck. So how do we do this well? How do we go from problem to action? And Sue Cavell and I designed a set of 6 steps. This was also supported by the team, UNICEF's team in West Africa, trying to find out how do we connect from the challenge to the solution. So we start with gathering, and we can go to the next step or next slide. So the first slide is gathering. We have to get the right people together. I mean, I know this sounds silly and this seems like so self-explanatory, but actually making sure we have the right people in the room is a key important factor in helping us to make sure we understand the right problems and we identify the right solutions. So this could be a team of program staff. This could be at a national level. There are many different ways that this tool can be used, but there's the important thing is carving out a set of some time to reflect as a team on the strengths and weaknesses of what's happening related to CLTS in a particular context, and getting those right people there. So this could be program managers, technical professionals, research collaborators, local government staff. These could be financing people, procurement people, monitoring people. We want to make sure we get the right people in the room. And so the folks who are spearheading this strategy will need to think about how to get the right people in the room to reflect on the challenges and potential actions. All right, next slide. Then we have to identify our priority contexts. Many of the countries we work in are vastly varied. There are very many different contexts within these places. And so it's very difficult to say, oh, we're going to do CLTS in my context that's most familiar to me is Bangladesh. So we're going to do CLTS in Bangladesh. It's been done there for years. We're going to do it exactly the same way that it's been done in this particular area, but we know that it isn't working, but we're just going to keep doing the same strategy over and over. Well, we want to understand what is it about that particular context or that particular area why these particular populations are being left behind. So language that you might be familiar with, it would be slippage, being left behind, populations that are at risk, particularly vulnerable populations. They might be displaced populations, they might be mobile populations, to trying to understand what those priority contexts are. And we've given you 3 different options of how to do these steps. So there's a digital table. There's like an actual worksheet. Those will be posted later on today or tomorrow. And here's the worksheet. So we've given you 2 examples. So there's a digital worksheet. There's also a slide deck. So if you're in a workshop setting and you want to project this on the screen while you as a team talk about it in small groups, that's also an option. And as always, you can just use a whiteboard or a piece of poster paper or a flipboard chart. Any of those ideas work. the most important part is the thinking process of identifying those different key priority contexts. So here you can see in the first column there is writing down what are those relevant contexts. Are they a cyclone affected area? Are they mobile populations? Are they remote, rural? Are they challenging? There is a reason why CLTS is stuck in these places. And the second column, writing a bit of a description about what it is. So if someone was to pick this up and wasn't familiar, what does this area look like? Okay, so we have Cyclone Z that happened in District A, B, and C. And what is the estimated, based on the data that we have, estimated number of households with improved sanitation? So here we might say, I don't know, less than 10%, as many of them lost the latrines in the cyclone. You might have a mobile population, which are focused in potentially Ward A and B, and maybe they have less than 5%. And the idea is to, okay, write down all of the potential target populations, maybe not the best language, but the potential populations you want to be working with, and then to narrow it down, because a strategy that works for a cyclone affected area may not work in a mobile population area. And we cannot connect a problem to a solution if we don't know who the solution is for, we don't know where the problem is. And so trying to find an idea of what is the context that we want to sort on? And you may only be able to, in your workshop or in your process, to select one, potentially two focus areas. But once you narrow down to those focus areas, it's much easier to select relevant strategies. Next step. So then once you've selected those areas, then we need to identify what those actual problems are. So then we're going to go back to that list of problems, and we're going to identify the top priority problems across those enabling environments, the markets and the demand. What are those main challenges within that particular program area? And this is where I'd love to see teams debate, discuss, think about pulling in other literature. I wonder, but I saw this study, or when I was in this particular context, or last time I was there, I experienced this. This is the time within your team to have these deep, rich conversations on how to identify what really are the problems in that particular context. You may know initially, as I showed that list of problems, you might know exactly what is your context and exactly what the problem is. But that might not always be the case. And so it's important to be able to identify what those problems are, because maybe you're getting the problem wrong. One of the things that I've known from my work in sanitation over the last kind of decade and a half is that many times we think, oh, we just need to motivate people. We need to motivate people. People just aren't motivated to get latrines. And then we start to dig into the actual situation, and there's no materials, or they've been told for 25 years to build a certain type of latrine that there's no materials for in the community anymore. But if we keep telling them, you just need to build a latrine, we just need to motivate, we just need to do awareness campaigns, we just need to continue the motivation, and that's the real issue, we might be missing out on what the real problem is. And that's why we recommend still, even if you think you know the problem, go back to that problem list and double check that you're not missing something else that's important. As a reminder, again, this is not an exhaustive list. Yeah, so here we go. Here's that list of problems again. So in many circumstances, I've done lots of work around CLTS in Zimbabwe, for example, on the Takunda program. I don't know if we have anyone from Takunda in the room today, but we came in thinking the problem is the product system. Punkt, which means point in German. That's it. It's the product. We need to figure out to make a better latrine because people aren't building it. But then we got into it and we actually realized, oh, problem isn't actually the product or the product system, the toilet design. The product is actually, no one understands the product design, which is actually quite good. And it's actually weak capacity development. Okay, this changes everything. Now we know how to unstick the problem in a different way, but we came in with the wrong problem. All right, I'm belaboring this, but I hope you understand that coming back to this list of problems is really useful and critical. So then how do you diagnose? We'll go to the next work. So this is in step 2. This is worksheet number 2. We've broken this single worksheet into 3 sections because it's quite a long one, too long for a slide. But you'll see here, if we go to that weak capacity development, so institutions and individuals, I'm reading in the last line, second column, lack the resources, training, and motivation to fulfill their roles in the sector. So we saw this a little bit in some ways in Zimbabwe, when the institutions and the individuals, the latrine builders, and the local local team members who were helping to install latrines didn't actually understand the latrine design. And so when they were installed, they broke within a year, and then no one was motivated to build a latrine. And so then we actually understood that this was actually the bigger problem. So the idea here is that as a team, you sit down and you go through this rubric and say, okay, is this a big problem? Is this a medium problem, or is this a small problem? So if it's small, you'll get institutions and individuals have the resources, training, and motivation to do their roles in the sector. We don't really have a problem around capacity development, but you might find it something else. Okay, going to the next slide. I'm getting myself ahead. So here's another example. So unclear policy and aligned strategies. As a team, you'd say, okay, do we think that this is a problem? So it's a big problem. There's no sanitation policy and no alignment between actors. That would be a big problem. A medium problem would be sanitation policy exists, but there's limited alignment between actors. And it's a small problem if the policy is being implemented and there's strong alignment between the actors. It's actually not a problem at all. Small to tiny to minuscule problem. Now this then worksheet is, we have it for each one. So this rubric exists for every single one of those problems. We can go to the next. And so you get a chance as a team to think through, okay, is it a big, is it a medium, or a small problem? And then once you've identified, again, those priority contexts and those priority problems, now it's time to go to solutions. Because again, and I'll repeat myself, again, if we don't know what the real problems are and who we're trying to solve those problems for and with, let me be very clear about that as well, and with, we can't identify the right ideas. Maybe actually it reminds me of another important point that I missed on who do we gather. It's very, very valuable to have community members in the room as well, and to have representatives from community groups or community members to be able to participate in this brainstorming activity as well. No matter how good of development professionals we are and how many years of experience we have in this sector, making sure we have voices from the communities we're working in the room when we're trying to solve their problems is really critical. All right, so moving now to identifying these potential ideas. So how do we get to those ideas? There are 27 ideas. Thank you, Katie. Next slide. Yes, here they are. And okay, we could have spent 6, 7, 8 years going through these again and again. This is a first cut. Open to ideas, open to suggestions, open to make this list strong. We wanted to find a way to make it sharp and fit on a page and be as overviewing as possible. So here we have the 27 ideas into those buckets as we've discussed before. And I'll go back to that policy and strategy bucket. So again, first thing is increasing political priority, doing some advocacy, improving policy and roadmaps, strengthening approaches and technical standards and regulations, developing out a guideline, strengthening those market enablers, or engaging market enablers. So we pull all these different ideas together. We might pick 2, maybe 3 from this whole list, but you can't do them all. There's a lot. So it's all about whittling it down, narrowing it down to a small number of potential actions. Next slide. Maybe also, actually, can you just go back? I'm sorry, back one, Katie. Apologies for that. So how do you do this? It's maybe not so clear, is you keep going back and forth between those pages which summarize the detail and the ideas, and you discuss it as a team and say, okay, we identified that policy and strategy and capacity strengthening are the biggest challenges. So if there are multiple ideas, like we have in policy and strategy, have a discussion as a team. Which one of these do we think is going to be the most important? All right, next slide. So then you might end up with 5 actions that might be possible for a big, long program, might not be possible for something short. So how do we get down to something that we can actually do in the time and the resources that we have? Next slide. And we use this final, or the second final worksheet called the prioritization. We're going to give you 2 different ideas of how you can do this. But you want to look at those different actions or ideas through 2 lenses. The first one is impact. Can this action make a difference? And we are not using a score that is going to be very robust and detailed. It's supposed to be a quick discussion as a team, discussion as a group, discussion in a workshop. Can this action make a difference? If we help to build the capacity of the local entrepreneurs in building latrines, can that make a difference? If we refine an appropriate toilet design, can this action make a difference? And as a team, yes, we think it can make a difference. Okay, good. 4, addressable. Can we do this? And I know this sounds really silly, but the number of program strategy meetings that I've been in where teams have said we need to, get the ministry on board and approve a new latrine design or approve a new training program, or we need to completely overhaul the way that environmental health technicians are trained in this country. Can we actually do that in the time that we have available? Maybe it's a really important thing to do, but can we actually do it? And so, okay, this is an example again from maybe from Madagascar or from Mozambique. Can we refine the toilet designs? Yes, we can do it. 4. So then we multiply. 4 by 4 is 16. It's a 16 score. That means probably that's a higher score. We might want to look into doing that. Another example would be political priority. So yes, if we increase the political priority of sanitation in this particular context for mobile populations, yes, that would make a difference, a big difference. 4, can we do it? We're a team of 3 and we have 6 months. Probably not. 2. 4 by 2 is 8. I know this sounds silly, but it helps us to refine and to be a bit realistic about what we actually can achieve in a program. Next slide. If you are not a numbers person, you might be a matrix person. And so this is exactly the same thing, but if you prefer to put sticky notes on a whiteboard or on a projected screen, this is another way to do it. So you can take those different actions and then you can identify them as high or low impact or addressable or non-addressable. And then you can identify them as high, low, do not consider, or explore partnerships and collaborations. It's just a different version of doing the same thing. We provided 2 different strategies. If you've got your finance people there, you might want to use numbers. If you have your design team there, you might want to use the matrix, but both work just as well. The whole step is just to prioritize and to get down from a long list of potential ideas to a short list of potential ideas. Okay, and then the final thing is to plan them. If you're anything like the programs that I've been in, we all have lots of great ideas in the workshop. We write down a really good idea. We've prioritized them. We've used sticky dots. We've made the dots on the posters. Everyone knows what our strategy is. And then it doesn't get picked up until the next time we have a meeting about it. And this is really common, right? So we want to make sure that we create an action plan to actually make that happen. And this is not a revolutionary step. This is just a key step in making sure we actually get things done. So if we go to step 5, or this is the worksheet 5. What was that context? Okay, we wanted to work with mobile populations in Ward A and B. One potential action is develop a national roadmap for safely managed sanitation for mobile populations. What do we need? We might need some consultant time and some staff time, and we need at least 1 workshop on this to make sure we get everybody on board. Who's going to do it? Okay, Ministry of Health focal point, steering group, technical committee. You can see we've given an example of really basic foundational steps to get this to happen. And what's going to happen in a quarter's time, we're going to have a draft roadmap finalized and circulated for comments. And this, again, sounds really simple, but this is where a lot of teams get stuck, right? Is we have lots of good ideas, but unfortunately, we all get busy with strategies and ideas and tasks and priorities, and we never actually get to do the actions that we want to do. To the very last here. So then step 6, monitoring, evaluating, and learning. So coming back then to how do we actually check to see this is working? We might have picked the wrong problem. It has been known to happen. And so we want to actually check and monitor an evaluation. They might require these actions and ideas might require adaptation. They might require revision. We need to check and see if they're working. We need to learn. And then we need to share that learning and share that learning with one another, especially within particular countries. So peer learning, making sure that we have at least some way of sharing this information across, even if it's something as simple as a LinkedIn post where you tag the other people working in the sector and you just create something simple. Making sure that people that need to have this information that are working in similar contexts actually have it. And then scheduling regular meetings. This could be monthly or quarterly. Meetings are annoying, but meetings put priority on activities. And if someone sees a meeting in their calendar for next week, it's a good reminder that they need to do something about it. So not always advocating for more meetings, but making sure we do have meetings can help us to move strategies forward. So that is very, very rapid overview of the 6 steps from problem to action. And I'd love, Katie, if we can just go back to slide 14. I don't know if that's possible, but to slide 14. We'll just, awesome, perfect. Okay, so again, the first step is get the right people in the room. And I'm really sorry that I missed at the beginning to mention that we need to make sure we have voices of the people that we are working with in the room. I know I'll say it over and over, but making sure that we aren't solving problems for communities, but we're solving problems with communities. That one word can really reshape things because we don't live in those communities often. We don't know the challenges that they're having, and we don't understand why a particular cement blend isn't working in that community because 6 months ago someone built a latrine with that cement blend and someone fell through the latrine floor and then no one wants to use it anymore. Silly example, but it has been known to happen. And so we want to make sure that we get the voices of the communities we're working with also in the room so we can make good decisions together. The next step is to prioritize our context, to identify what context we're actually talking about. So we might have a program that says CLTS is a big challenge or sanitation is a big challenge. Government standard or policy is to use CLTS. We're just going to go into all of these villages and talk to all of these people, and we're going to do CLTS and we're going to do triggering in 27 different villages or 27 different wards or multiple districts. What really are the main contexts that we want to be working in, right? So going back and identifying. There has historically been great tools to help identify those problem areas, but they might miss mobile populations. Those tools also might miss particularly vulnerable people. So trying to identify whether those are geographic context, social context, or even psychosocial contexts. What are those contexts that are priority? Then, for those selected contexts, moving to identifying what the real problems are. And for us experts, this could mean taking off our expert hats just for a moment and thinking big picture. It's hard, I know, but thinking outside of the box might be valuable. Then again, identifying actions in step 3, what could we do? Once we've listed down those ideas from the 27 ideas that we've provided, plus anything else you might come up with, we need to prioritize them because we probably can't do them all. We need to plan them so that we actually do those actions. And then finally, monitor, evaluate, and learn from what we've done and make sure that that learning is shared. So those are the 6 kind of steps, 6+1, 6+ gather steps that we recommend for this process. And Katie, I'm going to ask you to go to slide 11 really quickly. Thank you. So yeah, just as so the bulk of the idea book looks like this, but might be slightly different colors for those different common problems. And so again, here you see the definition of the problem. We've given you lots of further resources and tools to think about this from a variety of different organizations. Then we give you 4 ideas, and these are just ideas that we have seen work in our activities. So this is bringing information and ideas from Save the Children, from Pro-Wash and Scale, which was supporting many different organizations across Sub-Saharan Africa, from UNICEF, and also from the Sanitation Learning Hub. And then lastly, in that final bucket, final column there, examples. So what have other people done and what have they learned from it? So you're not starting out on your own. And all of these are linked, at least they should be, so that you can click on the links in French or English or in both and find your way. So that was a lot of me talking. I'm going to hand it now over to Steve. And yes, great, exactly. Perfect. Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Jess, so much for the overview. We hope it was clear to everyone what the purpose and the content of the idea book is. And now, before we move to a more open Q&A, we have one question to pose to the audience, which is, how could you use this idea book in your CLTS programs? So we would really appreciate any thoughts or insights you have to place in the chat based on your experience and context on how you might apply this resource to your programs. I'll give just a moment for folks to start putting that in the chat, and then we'll move on to Q&A. Okay, while folks start to draft their responses, maybe we can move to the next slide, Katie. A few questions did come in during the presentation, which I'll review, but while I'm doing that, feel free to pose other questions or comments in the chat. Jess, one of the first questions was, what wiki or knowledge-based platform did the team use to develop this idea book, if any?
Yeah, so this is great. So we pulled a lot of information and knowledge from across kind of our expertise group, recognizing we have different expertise. So I'm a market-based sanitation expert, but I've also worked in a lot of CLTS contexts. Sue Cabell has been working in sanitation for many, many years. We also pulled in the expertise of the Western Central Africa UNICEF team, as well as a sanitation learning hub. So I wouldn't say it's from one particular location or one particular place. It was just kind of pooling our expertise and going through multiple rounds of revision and reflection and internal workshops ourselves to help to find that balance between depth and clarity, which is actually really hard to find. But if you are interested to learn more, many of the resources I would say would be on the Sanitation Learning Hub that we are pulling from. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Jess.
Even,
Another,
sorry, the question is really, how did you do it? Did you use a technique, a website, a knowledge management tool, or just manual editing?
To bring all these ideas together, there were a lot of digital sticky notes involved, and we we had a series of workshops as a team to reflect on what the different challenges were, and then try to find ways to bucket those into clear ways and clear strategies. So we didn't use a particular tool. Most of what we did was done on Google Slides as part of online workshops within the team.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
okay. Alberto's question in the chat, does this book need to be used with a market-based approach, or can it be used also in case of self-construction?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think self-construction is still market-based for the most in some ways because some materials might be required. So I think it depends. That's coming from my own perspectives around MBS and market-based sanitation. But if there are any materials required, then you're still involving the market. So I think if we think about the market as another actor like local government, we can see how the different actors fit together, and that will happen regardless of CLTS or market-based sanitation or area-wide total sanitation. Whatever strategy you're using, they're different actors. So you do not need to doing an MBS strategy. You might see MBS-related language or market-based sanitation-related language because we wanted to push CLTS thinking a little bit outside of only self-supply, which my self-supply means using only materials from home because we recognize that many of those materials are still purchased, not everywhere. Madagascar, Mozambique might be some examples where that's not always the case, but it often, yeah.
Another question, Jess, is centered around the activation part of CLTS. A key problem in some cultures is that creating disgust is not appropriate and it can stop action rather than activating toilet construction. How is that addressed in best practices or within the idea book?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that would fall under, I'm pretty sure, the weak social permission. We had long conversations about whether that particular challenge would be its own problem. And we then lumped it into weak social permission. So if there are challenges around disgust, making sure that that is identified within that problem phase. And that's where the problem list might not be exhaustive for your context, but it can be a good sparking place. So if disgust is not working in your context, don't continue to try to use disgust. I think that's quite clear. There might be other ways to solve and to get around those challenges. But yeah, under the weak social permission bucket. Yeah.
What is the best strategy for easy and affordable access for populations of a country like Mali, knowing that the population constantly talks about poverty?
Yeah.
I'm not sure you can answer that question as it's so broad, but maybe you could speak to a little bit about like maybe some of the ideas and which ones might be relevant to discuss, financial access or financing of toilets.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. So I think if we go back to the enabling environment section, as Steve mentioned, there is a section there on financing, and that could be helping to support identifying subsidies within communities. So one of the examples that I believe we provided in the final version is from Bangladesh. Again, I have a depth of experience in Bangladesh, and one of the strategies we had there was for people that were backsliding or were really struggling. We identified that there was actually a ton of subsidy already within the system, whether that would be subsidy that was happening from government, whether that was subsidy that was happening from local NGOs or from religious groups, so it might be mosques or churches or temples. Or even from local elite community members who are subsidizing toilets. And so the idea is then not is to identify where those subsidies might already exist if a subsidy is a relevant approach. There's also obviously options like access to finance, debatable to what extent that works within CLTS. But I think that there are many, many different kind of financial strategies. The other side is making sure that the product is appropriately resourced for that context. So many products, sanitation products or sanitation designs are overscoped or underscoped. So making sure that that is aligned with communities and designing with communities rather than for communities. It's hard.
Great.
I think we would all be out of a job if it was an easy if it was that was an easy
Yeah.
sell.
Yes,
Yeah.
of course. There are two other related questions that I might just try to field myself or with Julia's assistance. One is, might the guide be available in other languages like in Spanish or Portuguese? The,
Yeah.
the answer is we could consider it. Pro Wash and Scale is meant to be responsive to the needs and requests of partners. So if there's enough demand, then yes, we could try uh, to dedicate some resources for further translation of the tool. Um, and then another question is
Really?
whether, yeah, go ahead. Uh, Another question was whether or not we might consider creating an online course around the idea book. Um, Jess, I don't know if this was part of any discussion throughout the design of the idea book. Maybe we could start there, and then Julia, you could step in if there are any future plans around it.
Yeah, so we discussed having a series of online seminars or opportunities to do that, but I think at the moment we've put together the guidebook or the idea book to be as stepwise as possible. There also are the worksheets that are also available or will be available shortly online, and the slides will be available shortly online. But we've designed it for teams to be able to work through themselves without necessarily needing a course, but potentially using this webinar as well as reading through the material. And if there's still interest or demand for a course after that, that could be something that Pro Wash and Scale could potentially look into, but it wasn't designed for that. We did try to keep things as contained as possible. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Let's see. I don't see any other remaining questions in the chat that we haven't addressed. Um, ah, the context culture of differing by country can hinder adoption. How is it considered in the design of the book? I think it's just that this is a pilot version based on a context, and it's always adaptable. It's intended to be adapted with those local and cultural considerations in mind. Is that right, Jess?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we started off, we thought about let's do a book for global. And then as we began to dig into all of the different nuances of those case studies, so beyond the ideas, then how do those actually ideas get used in practice? We wanted to only suggest ideas that had been used. And so with each of those, we tried to find then kind of local or as close to local cases as we could. And if we wanted to expand that, we could. Many of those cases are only unfortunately available in English and or French. And so there is some limitation if we do translation, which would be great, but that we don't necessarily have resources. But if there are other teams that have more of an insight into local case studies and local ideas for a Latin American context, that is something that we could take the same ideas, maybe reformate them a little bit and give local examples. Very easy to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, make it more
I just
specific.
saw I just
Yeah.
saw a similar question from Habib, so hopefully that
Oh,
answered your
cool.
question.
Yeah,
Um, are the materials copyrighted or freely usable?
that is a good question.
Julia?
Yeah, from our side, freely usable, but I don't know about the links to like other resources that are, in the text, but in general, freely resourced, just the book
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah, maybe just to also say, so right now the book is a PDF, but also online the worksheets and the slides that are fully adaptable, and those are available in editable versions. So again, the PDF, which is the main bulk of it, is a PDF, so more locked, but then the worksheets and the slides are in Word and PowerPoint, so you can change those around and update them. And if you would like an editable copy of the actual toolkit or the material itself, you can email the ProWash and Scale team. And maybe that comes to another question I see from Tina Tundra in the questions as well is how can we feedback? And we really would love to have you share ideas and thoughts, especially because we really wanted to pilot this, but because of the kind of global considerations of how things are changing so rapidly, we didn't get a chance to pilot. So this was lined up to be piloted in I think 5 or 6 different contexts through ProWash and Scale in Western Central Africa, as well as the UNICEF use of it, as well as the Sanitation Learning Hub use of it. So we did have a lineup, and then with funding changes, we weren't able to actually pilot it and use it with teams. So, but we wanted to get it out there and make sure that you have access to it. And then if you do use it, please, please, please come back to the team and let them know and provide feedback and ideas on how to make it and refine it and make it better. Yeah. And we'll provide
Great.
an email of how that can happen. So we'd love for folks to just email the ProWash and Scale team on that. Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much, Jess. I think we're coming to an end. I don't see any new questions. Um, with that, I think unless there's anything else, we can wrap up. So thank you all for joining today. We really appreciate your attendance and your participation and your interest in the idea book. Before you go, if you could just take the time, just 1 minute, to fill out a quick survey at the end, which is, I think, going into the chat. We'd appreciate it. And otherwise, thank you. Have a great rest of your day or evening. Thanks, everyone.